This is a quick video explaining what the Pastor's Guide to the New Testament is. This is a text that I developed over several years, and I'm going to give the background story on it, then I'm going to walk you through it briefly. The hope is just to give a better explanation of what this is and why it was created and how you can support the efforts that we have at Iron Sheep Ministries for its creation and its use. So I first went to Malawi 3 years ago, and at that time I was in the midst of my Master's of Biblical Studies. I went to Malawi with my pastor, Pastor Rick Cohen, and he invited me to join to help him teach. The church that we support there has roughly 150 plus churches that are all out in the villages. And the challenge that is faced is training up the pastors there. It's a huge challenge, is that the villages are completely remote, and the locals there have so little money. They live off of the land, and dirt floors, grass roofs, as simple as you can possibly live is the way that these people are living. No plumbing in their homes. The village might have one well in the middle of it, hole in the ground for their bathrooms, etc. So what Pastor Rick has been doing and going to Malawi for 20 plus years is going and teaching the pastors, going and providing them with Bible-based education to lift up the knowledge level of the pastors. So when I went, I was amazed at, one, their hunger that they had for the word and for learning. But I also realized the lack of resources that they have. They don't have the internet. They don't have smartphones. Now, some people do have smartphones, but the cost of the internet, you pay per gigabyte, per megabyte of download. And so it's so expensive for them that few of them can use the internet as a resource when they do sermon prep. So I came back from Malawi, and then I had an assignment for my master's class where I had to do basically a resource, create a resource for a pastor or a Bible teacher on the latter epistles. And it was basically a who, what, where, when, why context of some of the general letters at the end of our Bible and the end of the New Testament. After submitting the assignment, God kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, wouldn't this be a really cool thing for the pastors in Malawi? I was like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. That would be so cool. But God, that's going to be a lot of work. And he's like, yeah, but you're called to do it. And so that's what this is. It took at least a year of work to create. And then it was translated into Chichewa, which is what we have here. This is the entire thing translated into Chichewa. So what is the Pastor's Guide? What is it and how is it used? I actually put a camera up above us here so we'll see. So I'm going to go through page for page here so you can see what this is. It starts out with an introduction to an explanation for why I created it, is found on page 5. But then you have a breakdown here following the chronology of our Bible. You have an intro to the Gospels, where what that does is it goes through specific, I'm just going to use this one. The Chichewa is page for page identical in their own language. So the first segment is the intro to the Gospels, goes through Jesus's life, and it spells out all the things that are consistent in the Gospels. So this is a graph that has all the parables of Jesus in the synoptics. Every single parable that's in Mark, Matthew, and Luke is listed here. What is the parable and where can you find it? Jesus' miracles. Every single healing miracle, and then you have miracles over nature, miracles of raising the dead. Then you have continuing on of the life of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, the Transfiguration, his prediction of his death and resurrection, the Olivet Discourse, the resurrection. That is the beginning segment of the intro to the Gospels. Then you go through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, looking at what is unique to those texts. Each of the books has this same format to it. They always start out with a key theme, then you have the key verses, then you have background context. Who is the author and who is the audience? Now here we have an interesting fact. So I add in interesting facts, dig deeper, throughout is just elements that to dig a little deeper for the pastor, the person who's using this resource. Purpose. What is the purpose of this specific book? What's the date, location? What is it? Then keyword studies. There's keyword studies throughout the text, which give you the Greek and, if appropriate, the Hebrew for a word. So here on page 57, it's the word believe and the word life, as those are both elements that are strong in John's gospel. Then there's always an outline. And then after that, there are key elements, the I am sayings of Jesus in John's gospel. Each time Jesus said, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, etc. Then Jesus' signs in John's gospel. And then you go on at the end, there's always key verses, additional key verses. So now we look at Acts. This goes through and does the same thing, the outline, the who, what, where, when context. But then it goes into the fellowship of believers in the early church. Then we talk about Peter and then talking about Paul, the two key characters of Acts. There's additionally maps talking about the spread of the gospel, Paul's missionary journeys, etc. Then we go into Paul and his writings. This intros with a biography on the Apostle Paul. Each of the texts, what I tried to do is give context of who is the author. So for all of Paul's writings, rather than having it be reiterated at the beginning of every single book or letter he wrote, I did a segment here at the beginning all about Paul, or Saul, as he's also known as, and there's a timeline of his life. Then we go on to the first text of Paul, which is Romans. So going back to the table of contents here, you see that you then, in the same fashion that our Bible then gives us all of Paul's letters, goes through and gives us an overview of each of those. Then you have the general letters, which goes from Hebrews through Revelation. Then I'm going to flip all the way back to an amazing resource, which is the subject index. The subject index is every single subject that is discussed in the guide, alphabetically listed, and where you can find it. So, for example, Antichrist. I'm just here in A, so I look over at Antichrist, and I see page 120, 162, 166, and 185. Those are the 4 locations in which I discuss Antichrist. Page 120 and 162 are in bold. That means that those specific verses are more significant as it relates to that. This is a resource for the pastors in Malawi to use. And as you look through, this is the exact same translation, exact page for page, identical, but it's translated. Bishop Edwin Terra was the oversight in Malawi, and then Watson is the translator, an awesome guy that I personally got to meet and walk through. He and I connected and went back and forth in the process of translating it. And then Bishop Edwin then read every single verse that he translated so that we can be sure that Watson's translation into Chichewa was accurate. This past trip, I was able to go and share this resource with the pastors there in Malawi, walk them through how to use it, and then gave them assignments on giving lectures to the group of pastors on subjects. And the feedback that I got just warmed my heart to know that this tool, this resource, was used for exactly what it was designed for. The hope here, the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. This is not my thoughts. This is not a commentary. This is a resource to find where does the Bible talk about these subjects. So my goal here was to create a resource for the pastors, specifically in Malawi, to be able to better preach God's word. I have looked and I have searched and I have not found a resource that's quite like this. So I'm going to stop. I could keep talking about this forever. But if you want to support this, please do give to Iron Sheep. And if you want a copy, you can email me info@ironsheep.org. And I do request, though, that you do make a donation to help us cover the expenses. Thanks for your support. God bless you.